that I heard from Talha ibn Musarrif. Every time I passed him on the street, I said, tell me that hadith again. Tell me that hadith again. Tell me that hadith again. And people asked, why do you do this? And Shu'bah said, I wanted to put his memory to the test. If he had changed anything, I would have left him. Yeah? So you can see their exactitude, yeah? Do we have to finish now? Yeah? 5 more minutes, okay. Disconnection. So we've done the first two conditions, the third condition, right? Muharib ibn Dithar narrates from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, indeed the most hated of halal matters in the sight of Allah is divorce. You've heard this hadith, right? Abghadul halali ila Allahi at-talaq. Right? This is not sahih. Right? It's not true because Muharib narrates it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he's not a companion. There's a missing link. There's a missing link. And anyway, many companions divorced, and many of the ulama say, how can a halal be baghid to Allah? How can a halal be disliked to Allah? Many scholars also took that opinion as well as a secondary support for this. But the main point being is there's a missing link here. There's a missing narrator here. Yeah. There is a version in Abu Dawood which places Abdullah ibn Umar here, the companion, right? In Abu Dawood, there is a narration, there is a version of this hadith comes, and Abdullah ibn Umar is here. So it seems to be connected, right? But the great Imams, Abu Hatim, Daraqutni, Bayhaqi, they all said this is mursal, meaning that Abdullah ibn Umar shouldn't be there, right? It's actually disconnected. Mursal means disconnected, meaning the companion is missing. Okay? So this is a hadith which says that Allah doesn't like divorce, but the hadith doesn't satisfy the conditions of authenticity. Okay, this issue of being free of anomaly. Okay, so you have, this is a sanad. Can you see at the top the sanad? Yeah? Shaddad from Yazid, from Ma'qal, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah? Everybody with me, yeah? Now, this is in Tabarani, the Mu'jam al-Kabir of Tabarani, and it says, لَأَنْ يُطْعَنَ فِي رَأْسِ أَحَدِكُمْ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْ أَنْ يَمَسَّ إِمْرَأَةٍ غَيْرِ مَحْرَمٍ, or something, or كَمَا قَالَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. So for one of you to be stabbed in the head with an iron needle is better than for him to touch a non-mahram woman. Yeah, this is a hadith that's quite well known. Now, one of the narrators is Shaddad ibn Sa'id here. Yeah? And Shaddad, his memory is weak. Right? Bukhari, Uqayli, Ibn Hibban all say he makes mistakes. Yeah? So there's da'af, there's weakness in his memory. Okay, that's number one thing though, right? We're talking about anomaly here, right? So fine, there's somebody who's got some weakness in his narration, right? Now, are there any other asanid? Yes. Bashir ibn Uqba, Yazid, Ma'qal. Yeah, Ma'qal here. Same narrator here. Yeah. So from Shaddad narrates it from Yazid from Ma'qal. Bashir ibn Uqba narrates it from Yazid from Ma'qal as well. So Bashir, same sanad, but Bashir doesn't say the Prophet ﷺ said. Yeah? Shaddad, who's weak, says that Ma'qal said that the Prophet ﷺ said this. Yeah? But Bashir says that Ma'qal said it. Can you see? And it's a slightly different text. For one of you to take a needle and poke it in my head is more beloved to me than for a non-mahram woman to wash my hair. This is in Ibn Abi Shaybah, the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah. Yeah? So for one of you to take a needle and poke it in my head, but even though in Bukhari, we know the Prophet ﷺ went to Haram, who wasn't mahram, right, to him, and she used to delice his head, right? She used to delice his head. But Ma'qal said, I would rather be poked in the head with a needle than for a woman to wash my hair, right? But the more important point being that this is not marfu'. Marfu' means it goes to the Prophet ﷺ. It's mawquf, meaning that it stops at the companion. It is the statement of a companion, yeah? And Bashir is more reliable than Shaddad. Right? Bashir is a narrator in Bukhari and Muslim. Shaddad is not. Bukhari, Muslim don't accept him as a narrator in their Sahihain. Right? But Bashir is a narrator in the Sahihain. So what do? We compare these two, right? And we say that the Bashir one is asah, right? And many of the Imams said this is asah, and and this one is shadh. This one is anomalous, yeah. And this one is what's called mahfuz. It's called mahfuz, right? Okay. So this is an example of a hadith which had an anomaly on it. Okay, I've got an exercise here for you to do some hadith analysis. Have a look at this exercise. We'll turn the lights off for a second. Can you see that without the lights going off? Or okay. Give yourselves a few minutes. See if you can solve these. So, well, do you want me to explain? So you're on the receiving end of these reports, yeah. So these are what? These are chains of narration, yeah. There's 6 of them. You're on the receiving end. Here's you. Okay, that's you. You're there. You're hearing that person who hears that person who hears the last person in the chain, right? So you're on the receiving end of the reports below. For each isnad, indicate whether it is authentic or not, right? And what you've got to use this table, right, to decide whether that isnad is authentic or not. Right? Obviously, this is simplifying the whole thing a lot, right? But it's just to give you an idea of these 5 conditions in operation. So do it as a table if you like, or do it as a table, I think, and then we'll come back. Sorry? They don't state?
No, you receive it, so it doesn't hurt.
But okay. Yeah, but you're going to decide. Okay, that's a good question. You are going to decide whether the rest of it is truthful or not, is authentic or not. That's a good question. So decide. If you're a liar, then if you're not accurate, then you can make it inaccurate. Right? But we're not going to be looking at free of anomaly and free of hidden defects, because that would get too complicated in an exercise like this, yeah? Okay, shall we, everyone done? Yeah, good. Okay, so let's start with number 1. Let's give a score. Somebody write this score down. Okay, what's the answer for number 1? What did you guys get? Authentic or not authentic? Authentic? Number 1. Okay. So table. Okay. How do we name these tables? Okay, you can do it. Yeah, write it down. Right. So not. Sorry.
The 3rd generation is from.
I'm just going to come round. So authentic. What about this table? Huh? Authentic. That table. Okay, that table. Right. Make sure you don't copy the previous. They all might be wrong, by the way. Right. What did you guys get? Authentic. Okay. This table. Not authentic. Okay. Authentic. Right. So that was an easy one. Everybody got authentic. Huh? You can.
Because
okay, go on.
The Sahih of Imam Bukhari, the shortest chain is only 3 generations.
Yeah.
Long, right? So for number 1, it's only 2 generations. So I don't know if we should.
Okay. No. Very good thinking. But there are collections before Bukhari. Because Bukhari came in the 3rd century. He dies in 256. Muwatta, the Malik dies in 179. So you can even have shorter chains. So it doesn't mean. This is just an illustration. This is just it's an illustration, right? So, but very good question. Sometimes you got to think about that kind of stuff. So, okay, so everybody had authentic except this table, right? Let's see who's right. This table, the is that the Guyana table? Yeah. Huh? What? Oh, he's not Guyanese. All right. Okay. That's fine. Okay. So you heard from Maryam, yeah? Is Maryam truthful and accurate? Yeah. Right. And what generation is she?
2nd generation.
Right? So, what does that mean?
I am still in the 5th generation.
Huh?
I am from the 5th generation.
Right. What generation is this? What generation is this? What generation is this? Fourth, isn't it? Yes. So there's a missing link. Yes. Can you see? You guys missed the missing link. Yes. There's 3 generations. Yes. They were right.
So you just realized now?
Huh?
Connectivity.
Connectivity, right? They got it right, see? They got it right because they thought very, very carefully before. Basically, you guys, all you other guys, said a hadith, right? You guys would just be out the window. We wouldn't listen to you guys, right? We'd only listen to them, right? Because you guys didn't look at this. You took from Maryam, right? But there was no Maryam. But actually, you didn't take from Maryam. Yeah, do you understand? Yeah. Anyway, they got it right, yeah? Number 2. Number 2, what's the answer? Yes or no? Authentic or not authentic? Let's go with this one. Not authentic? Not authentic? Authentic or not authentic, number 2? This over there? No? Khadija? No? Authentic or not authentic? You're going to say yes. Everyone else is saying knowing. Not authentic, authentic. Number 2? Not authentic. Why is it not authentic? Who wants to say? Talha is neither truthful or accurate. Yeah, that's enough to deem the chain not authentic. Number 3. Number 3, is it authentic or not authentic? It is authentic, yeah? Tell us why it's authentic. Everybody got authentic or anybody got not authentic? Authentic, everybody, yeah? Authentic? Everybody authentic. Okay. So, why is it authentic? Aisha is?
Third generation.
Let's do the truthful and accurate. She's? Yes, yes. Maryam is? Yes. Ma'mar is? Yes. Now let's do the generations, right? Let's do it in reverse order. Ma'mar is? First generation. Maryam is? Aisha is? Third generation, right? And then your 4th generation, okay? Right, so everyone got that right. Number 4. What about number 4? Is that authentic? Straight away you can see, right? There's a disconnectivity of 2 people, regardless of who Ma'mar is. Yeah, that chain might have, all the narrators in that chain may be authentic and reliable. But the problem with that chain is that it has 2 missing links. Yeah, so that's one. Number 5, is that authentic or not authentic? Is that an authentic hadith? Is that an authentic hadith? Why not?
Because I don't know where she get the hadith from.
Huh? Because it doesn't go to the Prophet ﷺ, does it? It stops at the companion. So it can't be a hadith, can it? The Ma'mar is saying X, Y, Z. It's not the Prophet ﷺ who's saying X, Y, Z. We saw an example of that yesterday. What was it? Yeah, that if one of you was to be poked with a needle in your head is better than to touch a woman, right? That was actually the statement of Ma'qal, I think it was Ma'qal ibn Yasar, yeah, of a companion, somebody. And the actual wording was he kind of didn't like it, right? So number 6, what about authentic or not authentic? Yes or no? Who got yes? Let's go back again. Yes or no? Number 6. You didn't get around to it, or not authentic? Yes? Okay. Authentic. At the back, authentic or not authentic at this last one? Authentic? Authentic? No?
Actually,
Is it free of anomaly?
It's authentic.
Clarification. One person, both of them were from the same generation, but one of them is accurate while the other one is not accurate.
Over here? Okay, so what does that mean?
The thing is, Tariq might have related the hadith, but if Aisha backs him up, I think it's accurate and truthful.
Okay. So if Aisha backs him up, what if Aisha doesn't back him up?
But right now, she is because she is there.
Huh?
She's one of the
But right now she is part of it, but if she wasn't, then it would have been a truthful
So you're saying if this was two separate chains for two separate texts, then it would have been? Tariq's one would have been anomalous, right? Right, but as it stands, these two are saying the same thing now. Right, the matan is the same thing. Is it authentic or not authentic? It is authentic. What did you get? Authentic, yeah, it's authentic, okay? The fact that there's a weak narrator here is irrelevant really, because Aisha is strong. We can depend on Aisha's narration. And sometimes weak narrators can be right. You know, they're not always wrong. Sometimes a weak narrator is just unreliable in their memory. Sometimes they get things right. Sometimes they get things wrong. But what we can't do is we can't independently rely on that narrator, right? So that's what you've got to do. Okay. So that was just the exercise. Who won the?
It was a draw because they got the first one right.
Yeah.
And the last one wrong.
Yeah.
And the last one they got wrong.
They got the last one wrong, did they? Okay. they got it right. Okay, so I think this table got it. Okay. Now, just a bit more left, really. There wasn't much more. These are the 4 grades of authenticity that the scholars use. And the first one is sahih, right? Which basically means that the hadith is sound. The hadith is accurate, it's authentic, right? And a hadith is sahih or authentic when it fulfills those 5 conditions, right? Those 5 conditions. Now, the term hasan, right, is a level below. And a hadith becomes hasan and doesn't remain authentic if there's some weakness in the accuracy of the narrator. If there's a weakness in the truthfulness of the narrator, we don't say that's hasan, right? That then drops to mawdu' even, to fabricated, yeah, because he's not truthful, right? If the narrator is very, very imprecise with their memory, it drops to da'if, right? Okay, so if there's a drop in the memory, if the narrator is slightly weak on their memories, you know, weak enough that we don't make it authentic, it can get to hasan, okay? But if they're very weak, it can go to da'if. Okay, so that was condition number 2, right? So if there's something going wrong with condition number 2, it gets to there. A sahih hadith can drop to a da'if hadith if condition 2 drops, which is the memory, or even if connectivity drops. So if there's a disconnection in the hadith, right, then the hadith would become da'if, okay? And it can also be da'if if it's anomalous, right? Or it can also be da'if if there's a hidden defect, right? Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? Do you want me to repeat that? Yeah, okay. So let's repeat this, right? Let's go back to these. Because it's easier this way. Okay, here are the 5 conditions, right? If these 5 conditions are fulfilled, the hadith is what? Sahih, okay? If any of these conditions are not fulfilled, it's not sahih, okay? And then we decide whether it's hasan, da'if, or fabricated, right? If this is not there, if the person is untruthful, if the person fabricates, if the person concocts statements and attributes those statements to the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith basically becomes fabricated, right? It's mawdu', right? It's mawdu'. If this isn't there, depending on how inaccurate the narrator is, if the narrator is slightly inaccurate, then the hadith becomes what? Hasan, exactly, hasan, okay? If the narrator is very weak, right, i.e. they don't know what they're saying, what they're doing, right, they're just all over the place with what they hear and what they just repeat, you know, then it can become weak as well, and that's called da'if, okay? That's called da'if, right? What if number 3 isn't present? Condition number 3. So if there's a missing link, where do we get to? We drop to da'if, yeah? We drop to da'if, right? If there's anomaly, right? If it's not free of anomaly, if there's an anomalous narration. So let's say all of these are there, right? The narration, the narrators are all reliable, the narrators are all accurate, all of the chain is connected, right? But this chain of narration goes against another 10 chains of narration. All the other 10 chains are saying one thing, and this chain is saying another thing. This chain is what? Anomalous, right? If that happens, what do we say about this hadith? It doesn't fulfill this condition now, does it? Right? And the hadith becomes da'if, yeah? It becomes weak. Yeah? Everybody with me on that one? I think I'm losing people. Am I losing people? Huh? No? Okay. Then okay, number 5. If there's a hidden defect, right, which is, there's a lot to say about that, but just suffice to say, if there's a hidden defect, then the hadith would become, some hidden defects don't affect, but for the purposes of this discussion, it would become da'if, okay? What we're talking about hidden defects that don't fulfill the conditions of authenticity anyway. So by definition, if this isn't there, then there would be, the hadith would become da'if. Okay, so that explains these 4 categories. So when you come across in the books of hadith, this hadith is da'if, this hadith is sahih, this hadith is hasan, you know now, memorize these 5 conditions and you'll know, okay? Okay, now coming on to the 6 books. So you've all heard of the 6 famous books of hadith, right? Bukhari, Muslim, Nasa'i, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud and Ibn Majah, right? So these were all scholars of hadith who lived in the 3rd century of Hijri, and they were all basically from Central Asia. There's not a single Arab amongst them. Bukhari is from Bukhara, which is Uzbekistan. Muslim is from Nishapur, I think it was. Yeah. Tirmidhi is from Tirmidh, or Central Asia. Nasa is from Nasa, I think Persia / Central Asia. Abu Dawud is from Sijistan. And Ibn Majah is Qazwin, right?
Muslim, he was ethnically an Arab, but he wasn't from.
Was he?
Yeah.
Okay, possibly, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. So, at any rate, these people grew up or originated or were based in Central Asia. Okay, so you can see how knowledge has moved on to non-Arabs now by this point in time. And these people, they write these books. Now, the most authentic of these books are the first 2, Bukhari and Muslim, right? These are the 2 most authentic books. Bukhari and Muslim differ from the other 4. Before I say that, actually, let me say the first point at the top. You know, so many people call this collection of 6 books the Sahih, the Sihah Sitta, they call them. The 6 authentic books. That's a misnomer. It's actually a misdescription. It's actually an incorrect description of these books. They're called, actually, according to Muhaddithin, Al-Usul al-Sitta. Basically the 6 canonical works, if you like, or the 6 works that are referenced frequently. They're not called the 6 authentic works, right? That's actually a misnomer, right? So just to clarify that point, because they're not all authentic, right? And they intended for them not to be authentic, except for Bukhari and Muslim. Bukhari and Muslim, they intended for their books to be authentic, right? And the titles of their books are As-Sahih, Al-Jami', Al-Mukhtasar. These are the titles. They actually call their books. But the rest of them don't do that, right? Bukhari, what he does, and so he basically includes everything on his condition. So if these 5 conditions that we've talked about, if they're fulfilled, right, then Bukhari must include the hadith in his collection, right? And Bukhari goes for the highest level in each of those conditions. So he goes for the highest level of reliability, the highest level of accuracy, etc., etc. Yeah? And he looks at condition 4 and condition 5 very, very, very carefully, right? Extremely carefully. So for him, if a hadith fulfills those conditions, he has to include it in his book. He will not leave it out, right? And that's a very, very important thing to bear in mind. It's extremely important. Why? Because if the hadith is not in Bukhari's work, then you know that Bukhari didn't agree with that hadith, or that it didn't fulfill the conditions of his work, right? So it raises questions, right? So that's an important way of thinking about it. Now later, and scholars like Ibn al-Jawzi, Bayhaqi, they all say this, right? Daraqutni, actually, that scholar right at the end, he wrote a book called Al-Ilzam wa Tatabbu', basically, which was that he went through Bukhari's work, and he basically wrote, he tried to pick out anywhere where Bukhari might have missed out a hadith, and where Daraqutni thinks he should have included the hadith according to his own conditions. What that means is that Daraqutni appreciates the fact that Bukhari has in his mind that if the hadith fulfills his conditions, it has to be in his book. Otherwise, Daraqutni could not have written his Ilzam. Ilzam means that you're holding somebody according to their own conditions, right? A lot of people don't appreciate this, especially later authors of works of Usul al Hadith, the topic that we're discussing. People like Ibn Kathir, even contemporary people like Albani and Ahmad Shakir, people like Ibn Hajar, even Nukhbatul Fikr, they don't appreciate this point that the early scholars like Bayhaqi, Daraqutni, and slightly later Ibn al-Jawzi have made, right? Which is very, very clear, right? They think that in Bukhari, there are many hadiths which are sahih, but also there are hadiths outside of Bukhari which are according to his condition, according to his level, if you like. Okay, so that's and the reason that they say that is because they base it on Bukhari saying, the Bukhari said something. He said that I have included in my book, right, what is sahih, and a lot of sahih, I've not put this right, and most of the sahih I have left out of my book, right? Most of the sahih I've left out. But what people don't realize is that what he's including in his sahih is according to a method. He's not just haphazardly taking sahih and leaving sahih, right? What he means by what he's included in his sahih is the top level of sahih. Okay? So I know this is a bit, maybe for some of you, a bit technical, but it's very, very important to understand this when you're looking at hadiths, because you guys are going to be coming across hadiths. And also, like I said yesterday, I want you to appreciate the complexity of Bukhari, because it is a work that's been written for scholars. It isn't a work that's been written for, the brother here was discussing yesterday, and I said the very first hadith in Bukhari, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, which we saw yesterday, he actually omits a bit in the middle out deliberately, right? And he doesn't tell you he does that. But that's because he knows that you will know if you were a scholar, because he writes it for the people of his time, which are scholars, the muhaddith. Anyway, that's Bukhari. Muslim is also very, very similar to Bukhari. He has a particular condition, and he includes those hadiths. Now, one of the differences between Bukhari and Muslim is that Bukhari has chapter headings in his book. Muslim has no chapter headings. Okay, but if you look at Muslim today, it has chapter headings. So where do those chapter headings come from? Right? So under each category of hadiths, Muslim, in the print that we have today, there are chapter headings. The chapter on wudu, the chapter on prayer, the chapter on whatever it might be, right? So where have those chapter headings come from, right? Basically, Imam al-Nawawi, in the 7th century, he came along, did a commentary on Muslim, right? And he was the one that put chapter headings, right? Now my teacher, Sheikh Akram, he's writing a commentary on Muslim, and basically, what's generally recognized anyway is that often Nawawi places chapter headings in the wrong places. So what do I mean by that? What Muslim does in his work is this. This is what he does. He brings the Sahih hadiths which fulfill his conditions, right? He places them here, okay? And then what he does sometimes is that he says this in his introduction, Muslim actually says it. He says, then what I do is I will bring hadiths, right, that are not on my condition, that don't fulfill my conditions, underneath those first authentic hadiths to back the first hadiths up, yeah, to provide support and to show some differences between the two types of hadith, right? And also what he does sometimes is he brings hadiths which have a hidden defect. And he does that deliberately, and he places it at the end of his chapter. Now that you know that, right? There are 3 levels of hadith in Muslim now, yeah? There are what we call his usul. I should have put this on a slide actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm speaking from the top of my head, but I should have put it down, but I'll say it anyway. There are his usul, his top level of hadiths. There are his mutaba'at, which are the supporting hadiths, which are not on his condition. You shouldn't say this is in Muslim. Yeah, you can't say akhrajahu Muslim. You have to say akhrajahu Muslim mutaba'atan. You have to make clear that this is actually not. And then there's a 3rd level of hadith, which is a hadith which has a hidden level of defect. I'll give you one example, which I looked into, and I asked my teacher Sheikh Akram what his opinion was on the issue, and other people have said this as well. There's one hadith where in Muslim where it said that the giver of interest and the taker of interest are cursed, and they are equal in their sin. They are equal in their sin, right? But if you look at the whole chapter in Muslim, if you look at the whole chapter, you'll find that hadith, that particular wording, they are equal in sin, وَهُمْ فِي الْإِثْمِ سَوَاء, that comes at the end of his chapter. This is number 1 point. Number 2, it kind of contradicts the hadith that precede it. So Muslim is making clear, not with words, just by through ordering his hadiths. So the muhaddith will know this. You and me, if you don't study it, you won't know what he's doing here. But the muhaddith will know, because you've got to compare the other hadiths in this chapter, right? And the other indication that this is not correct, that hum fil ithmi sawa, is that very often in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He declares war on those people who deal in interest, who is He declaring war on? Whenever He criticizes, in the Quran, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticizes riba, who does He criticize? Does anybody know? What activity of riba does He criticize? Huh? The consuming riba. Consuming the إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا. Yeah, يَأْكُلُونَ. Allah is very precise with His words. Right? Because when you take something, riba, Allah declares war on you, and you're obviously much worse than the person who's giving it to you, because he's poor. Right? You're the one who's mistreating that person. You're the one who's abusing your wealth, not the other person, right? So there's another indication that here's a hadith that doesn't fully accord with the Quran. Remember we talked about yesterday about comparing Quran with hadith. This is what alerted me to it in the first place, because I thought the Quran is always condemning those who do. That doesn't mean that if you give riba, that it's okay. That doesn't mean that, right? But there is a difference. There's a priority here, right? There's a hierarchy. So then I thought, hang on a second, let's study this hadith. And then, I looked into it. So that's just an illustration, yeah? That now, given the fact that you know that now, right? If somebody comes along and they're not fully appreciative of this order in Muslim, and you put a chapter in the middle between his supportive hadiths and his original hadiths, what's going to happen? Or you put a chapter just before a hadith with a hidden defect, what's going to happen? You're going to think that the start of Muslim's chapter was actually where the hidden, it's not a hidden, it doesn't have a hidden defect in it. You understand? So this is what's happened with Nawawi's collection. So my teacher Sheikh Akram, he's re-chapterizing based on an isnad analysis of Muslim, and that will be, inshallah, may Allah give him tawfiq. I think that'll be a major contribution, because nobody has done this before. It needs to be done with Muslim, because people come to Muslim, look at Muslim, it's in Muslim. Right? But it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated. Those who study hadith know this, right? I just want to go back to Bukhari, right? Same with Bukhari, by the way, right? He's got 2 types of hadith, or even 3 types of hadith in his collection. Now let me tell you, right? The other thing, like I said, Bukhari does have chapters, right? He himself included his chapters. Now, what Bukhari is absolutely amazing. He's absolutely. I'll give you the example now. Okay, firstly, here's an example of this is Bukhari, right? And this is what's known as the Nuskha Sultaniya. This is the Sultani copy of Bukhari. This is the most accurate edition of Bukhari. It was commissioned by Abdul Hamid al-Thani, the last Khalifa of the Ottoman state, right? He commissioned it. And Zuhair Sultan, he's the one that photocopied it and made it a bit nicer. Now, this is the most authentic copy. I just wanted to show you the image of that. Now, here's an example of a chapter in Bukhari. Okay? Here's an example. Can you see here? There's a chapter here, right? Yeah? There's a chapter. Bab means chapter. What is said regarding the one who regards an alcoholic drink lawful to drink and calls it by another name. That's from Bukhari. Bukhari wrote that down. Okay? Now that's important. Because what Bukhari does, he's doing two things in his book. Number one, he's bringing all the authentic hadiths that he thinks are authentic at the highest level according to his condition. That's the first thing that he's doing. The second thing that he's doing is that he is deriving rulings from these hadiths, right? And he tells you his ruling that he's deriving from this hadith here. Yeah, that's what he's doing. So you need to bear that in mind. So what you have to do when you come to Bukhari, if you're looking at a hadith, you need to tie it in with his chapter heading, right? You need to see what Bukhari thinks this hadith is suitable for. Now, of course, a hadith can be suitable for many things, right? It can be suitable for a number of things. So any hadith might have a number of lessons in. So what does Bukhari do? He repeats the hadith in his book. So sometimes he has hadith in his book which have been repeated 13, 14 times, right? That you get that, right? And that is another indication that Bukhari, right, he only includes in his book those hadiths which are on his condition, right? And if he, included hadiths in his, and he includes everything on his condition. Sorry, he includes everything on his condition, right? Now, okay, so this is the chapter heading, and this is a hadith. Now let me tell you something. There's a type of report in Bukhari which is called mu'allaq, right? You may have heard this term, or it's called ta'liq, or they call the ta'liqat of Bukhari. So you can write this down if you want to, right? The mu'allaqat or the ta'liqat of Bukhari. Now what that means is that sometimes Bukhari, just after his chapter heading, he brings a report like he's done here, which is not on his condition, but he indicates that. And the way he indicates that is that he starts with qala. He said. Yeah? He said. If Bukhari in his book says he said, right? Let me give you the previous image, if I can. Here. Here's one hadith here, right? Which is on his condition. This starts with haddathana, right? Here's a hadith which starts with haddathana. And here is a hadith which starts with qala. Okay? Two different starts to the hadith. Yeah? What's the difference? When he starts with haddathana, when he starts the hadith with haddathana, like here in red, he is saying that this is on my condition. Right? So we can say that this hadith is in Bukhari. Right? We can say akhrajahu al-Bukhari. Bukhari transmitted it or related it in his book on his condition. That's what it means, right? If Bukhari starts like this, waqala, it means that the hadith is not on his condition, right? But he still brings it because he thinks it backs up his point in his chapter heading. But you can't say it's on his condition. Do you understand? So he's using it for his fiqh. He's not using it to say that this is on my condition. So sometimes you can go a little lower in level and say it's, and use something for fiqh purposes that aren't at the top level. Do you understand that, yeah? Am I bringing everybody with me? I know it's a bit technical, but I think you guys can, inshallah, I've been told that the Trinidadian education system is a very good one. I know you're not all from Trinidad, but I'm assuming that you're all the same anyway. All the education systems are the same, but this is really, really important. Now let's look at this. Anybody doesn't understand, I'll repeat if you don't understand. I'll repeat. Don't worry, just put your hand up if there's something you don't understand. Ask the questions now before I carry on, because it's gonna build on what I'm saying. Everybody with me? Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. So Bukhari has, if he starts with qala, it's not on his condition. Yeah? So what has he got here? What has he got here? He's got a hadith here that says, from among my followers, there will be some people who will consider illegal sexual intercourse, the wearing of silk, the drinking of alcoholic drinks, and the use of musical instruments as lawful. Yeah? They will make lawful illegal sexual intercourse, zina, harir, the wearing of silk, the drink shurb al-khamr, and ma'azif, which is basically musical instruments, right? As lawful. Right? And it carries on, Allah will, destroy them, turn them into monks and pigs and monkeys. Now, what the muhaddithin say is that you can't say this hadith is in Bukhari unless you clarify that it's in Bukhari ta'liqan, meaning that it's not in its condition. He doesn't consider this strong enough, right, to be in his book. That's number one. Number two thing that we notice here is that this hadith is the only time that this has appeared in Bukhari. There's no other place. He only takes one ruling from this hadith, right? And that ruling is the people who make khamr lawful by calling it with something else, right? He does not take the ruling of musical instruments. He doesn't consider it valid for that. He doesn't consider it valid for wearing of, for the point about wearing of silk and zina. He said, in his opinion, this report doesn't stand up for those rulings. It only stands up for the ruling of khamr, for alcohol. Yeah? With me there, yeah? Yeah.
And there would be other hadith that support that idea as well, though, about illegal sexual intercourse being taken as lawful.
Of course, there might. Of course, what you then have to do is you'd have to look at each independent issue, right, and then see if there's hadith or Quranic. Obviously, we have Quran for sexual intercourse, right? We have Quran for that. For wearing of silk, we have Sahih hadiths. But this particular report doesn't stand up. Now, the problem is musical instruments, right? This is the strongest narration in existence for musical instruments. And this is why it's in Bukhari, but ta'liqan only. It's not even strong enough to be in Bukhari by itself, right? And even then, Bukhari doesn't use it for musical instruments. He knows he can't do that, right? So, but I just wanted to give you this as an example of how to read Bukhari, right? You've got to look at what he's saying at the beginning of the hadith. Is he saying, قَالَ حَدَّثَنَا? Right? You've got to look at what he's saying in the bab, in the chapter. Is what's in there being backed up? And does the hadith appear elsewhere in Bukhari? Right, I'll give you another example. On this. Have you heard of the, me and Dr. Rada and I were talking about this. Have you heard of the hadith that says that don't let your children out at night, at Maghrib time? فَكُفُّوا صِبْيَانَكُمْ. Right? Because the shayateen, they come out that time, right? And then after a while, let them out, right? Okay, so, I was asked, what's this mean? It doesn't, it doesn't make sense, right? That's what, somebody was saying. And so I said, okay, let's look at it. Let's look at it in Bukhari. Let's see what Bukhari says. So this is what I did, right? I traced the hadith all the way through Bukhari, and it appears 4 or 5 times, right? Now the hadith says, it's part of a longer hadith. It says the Prophet ﷺ is saying to people, close your containers at night, right? Because animals come, right? Or disease descends. Close your doors at night, right? Shut your, douse your fires at night. So the Prophet ﷺ is giving a series of advices, right? Don't forget, he's the leader of Medina at this point, right? Why is he giving worldly advice? Because he's a leader. Remember we talked yesterday about the functions of the Prophet ﷺ. This is what he's doing now. He's got a certain function here. So keep this in mind. Then he says at the end of the hadith, keep your children in because shayateen come out at Maghrib time, because the shayateen come out, then after a while let them out. Now, this hadith is in Bukhari. It's haddathana, right? All the way through, right? And Bukhari brings it in every chapter of this hadith, i.e. he brings it under the chapter of dousing fires. He brings it under the chapter of closing your containers. He brings it under the chapter of closing your doors. But deliberately, he does not bring a chapter of keep your children in at night, right? He doesn't do that. So immediately what we know is that for Bukhari, that particular bit of the hadith isn't strong enough for his book. So there's a problem in the authenticity of that particular bit, because what we've done is we've traced the hadith through Bukhari. We've looked at how the chapter headings of Bukhari are what they're saying. Okay, so do you understand? That was just to give you my own opinion on this hadith. Shayateen actually, in Arabic language, can mean two things. And it's been used in hadiths in both manners. It can be used to mean devils, as in jinn, but it can also has another meaning, by the way. It can mean snakes. And in fact, very interestingly, Bukhari in one point of his in his Sahih, one of the narrators says jinn instead of shayateen, and Bukhari indicates that this is a mistake. It's not jinn, it's shayateen, right? The reporter was wrong. So which is very interesting because he might be indicating to us that don't necessarily take it as jinn, right? So anyway, so why shayateen, right? Why can shayateen be snakes here? And what I was looking at is why Maghrib time. Now, so I studied snakes. I looked at snakes, right? What happens in the deserts is that you have cold-blooded animals who can't heat their own bodies up, right? Now, what happens is that they come out around Maghrib time when the sand is still hot, the rocks are still hot, and they come out and they spread and they lie on and they heat their bodies up because they need external sources of heat. So what a possible meaning, and I'm pretty much convinced by this, is that what was happening at the time of the Prophet ﷺ is that around Maghrib time, these animals and vermin are coming out, and it's dangerous for children to be out at that time. So why, and then the Prophet ﷺ wait a bit, because after that they disperse. The reptiles, they disperse, and then it becomes safe. And the Prophet ﷺ then let because why would it be okay for children to be out very late at night and not at Maghrib time, right? That's one question, right? And also, just look at the context of the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ is giving worldly advice. Close your containers, close your doors, douse your fires, and then he suddenly becomes kind of a mystical advice, right? So that's one. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Yes?
Is it possible that there are da'if hadiths in Bukhari?
No, there are no da'if hadith in Bukhari. Maybe in his mu'allaqat, in his ta'liqat, in this type of hadith, yeah. But he will indicate to you by using another word, yeah, by saying yuqal, right, or it is said, right. So that's another topic, But what you've got to make sure is that if Bukhari says haddathana, it's in his book, and that can never be da'if, and it's not even hasan. It is the most top level of sahih.
Is there a version
Yeah.
of it?
Sorry?
Is there a version of it?
No. You see, you keep Bukhari as it is. You keep Bukhari as it is. But it's not hard. It's not, well, I suppose if you don't know Arabic, then it becomes a bit hard. Because look, they haven't said it here. They haven't told you what's happening here. You understand? So you think that this is on the condition of Bukhari. It's not. Huh?
Sheikh Al-Albani, he always, like, each book, Sunan, like Sahih.
Yes.
Is that like something?
That's not dependable, and he's made many hadiths in Muslim da'if, and the problem with Sheikh Al-Albani is that he doesn't look at the 5 conditions properly. He looks at the first 3 conditions, and even that sometimes he gets it wrong, and then the last 2 conditions he doesn't basically look at it. He doesn't do an in-depth analysis. It's much safer to depend, and there's a lot of contradictions in his books. He contradicts himself a lot. Right, in one book he'll say something, another book he'll say something else, and a lot of his students now are admitting this now. They've admitted this, and they've admitted that Albani's gone wrong a lot. So anyway, so do you appreciate what I'm saying here? I just want to give you a flavor of Bukhari's complexity, right, and the complexity of the. So when you come to Bukhari and you come to Muslim, don't just create a fatwa. Basically, don't just say, look at this ma'azif, musical instruments, right? And Bukhari himself is not using it. And you think Bukhari did, right? Okay. So just to finish off very quickly, then we'll start off on the women issue. Yeah?
Okay, so I realized that these 6 books,
Yeah.
I have come across the Muwatta of,
Yeah, Muwatta Malik, yeah?
it is not considered,
It's not considered part of the 6 for various reasons. The main reason being is because these 6 books all contain only prophetic hadiths. The Muwatta also contains some of Malik's own opinions, fiqh, and also contains companions deliberately. But actually, Muwatta is a very, very authentic book. If you want the most authentic books, you look at Bukhari, Muslim, and Muwatta, right? So I think for a lay person, if something's in Bukhari and Muslim, or Bukhari or Muslim or Muwatta, it's pretty much dependable. Because even that, anyway, so The rest of the 4 books, by the way, their authors never intended for every hadith in there to be authentic. And in fact, if you study Tirmidhi, many times he will say this is gharib, this is shadh, this is anomalous, right? Many times he'll say, so they clearly, and none of them have said that all we're including is in my opinion, Ibn Majah, if something's only in Ibn Majah, I've never come across a hadith which is only in Ibn Majah, right? And none of these are the 4, that's sahih. And in fact, Ibn Majah did not used to be part of the 6 books. It was only in the 6th century it was added to the 6 books by some of the scholars. So whenever I've looked and it says just Ibn Majah at the bottom, I've always looked at it and I've always found it to be a problem, right? So I think just as a takeaway, if you want to depend on hadith, make sure they're in Bukhari or Muslim or Muwatta. After that, Tirmidhi, sometimes it says that a hadith is sahih, so you can rely on that as well, if Tirmidhi says it, yeah? Okay. Right, so that's that. Okay, any questions? And we'll finish on that. If there's any questions on that, otherwise we'll start with the women stuff.